relationship. Left versus right. Us versus them. While we pay to keep our politicians fighting, how do we, the people, rise up and solve the great challenges of our time? We do it by embracing freedom and liberty. There may be no such thing as a free lunch, but this hour is as close as it gets. Welcome to A Free Solution.
All right, welcome to A Free Solution. I'm Kevin Wilson, your host for today. Thank you so much for joining us here on this wonderful Monday afternoon. We're live here on WYSL until 2 p.m. Give us a call if you want to participate in the show, 585-346-3000. That's 585-346-3000. Or leave your comments online or streaming on the Free Solution Facebook page, Free Solution YouTube channel, Free Solution group, or the Kevin Wilson pages. Wherever you're listening today, appreciate y'all being here. Again, that number is 585-346-3000 if you want to call in and participate in the show. And today, again, we're going to talk about a couple different topics. We'll see how many we get to. We're going to talk about the something going on in Florida related to licensing and roofing and hurricane cleanup and all that stuff. And I'll probably spend a good amount of time talking about that. I want to talk about, how do we how do we respond effectively to disasters? How do we create government policies that disincentivize preparation, and how do we do a little bit better in making sure that we are developing policies that encourage folks to be prepared and allow people to effectively come in to help in situations where there is disaster. So again, Florida is still recovering from Hurricane Ian. And I have some folks who are, that I'm close to that were down there. My brother's down there. A guy who's one of my best friends in high school is down there. Was hit pretty hard on the west coast of Florida. And they luckily they're fine. All the folks I know down there are fine, but a lot of their communities are devastated. Many folks lost their homes altogether, had property damaged by flooding, had their roofs, their windows, a whole bunch of stuff damaged. And it's an expensive hurricane. And so again, what I want to get to with this is two things. One, it's the story, the ridiculous licensing story, which these are always all over the place, about someone trying to come in and do roofing work in that area. And then the other is just, again, does it make sense to structure our insurance, our subsidies, our disaster relief around what is going to be a known event, right? Like Florida gets hit by hurricanes. And yet this is an abstract for me. I spent the first nearly 12 years of my life, living in the very, very southern tip of Georgia. We evacuated for hurricanes a couple times. I remember sitting in the car on the road, just like not moving for hours and hours at a time when we had to evacuate a couple times. It was a thing, right? Living in coastal Georgia, like occasionally you'd have to leave. And so this is just the reality of like what life is down there. And that existed before talk of global warming and everything too, that maybe it's making it worse, maybe it isn't, I don't know, but like that's just a reality for life living down in that area of the country. And so let's talk about the roofing thing first. So there's this guy from Texas. He runs a roofing company down there, licensed roofer. His name is Terrence Duque. And after the hurricane hit, he had a roofing business. He's licensed. He has good ratings over in that area in Texas where he does business. And he decided to go out to Florida and see if folks need their help. Because what happens in these situations, right? Like there's already, like even in this part of the country where there isn't a natural disaster happening, trying to get a contractor for something can be difficult, right? It's it depends on who you're looking at and what you look for, but a lot of folks are booking way out, right? Florida has a similar problem, had a similar problem even in a non-disaster situation. So imagine, again, everyone's booked up, everything's happening. There's a lot of incentive for folks to come in and to want to help. And sometimes they're going to come in and they're going to help and be charitable and do their thing. And sometimes they're going to come in, they're going to charge you money, but like, so what? Like, so what if people are charging you money for that thing? The what you want done is if you have a hole in your roof or in your window or in the side of your house because of hurricane damage, you want that fixed as soon as possible, right? And if you have to pay money for that, you're grateful that like you're able to get someone to actually go in and do the job, right? So this guy was down there. He's licensed in Texas, and uh, Florida arrested him. Like the county sheriff's office charged this guy with a felony. It's of breaking a law, not being doing contracting work without a license that carry up to 5 years in prison under Florida law. Like so, this dude could go to jail for 5 years. It's and then like he could be charged with a different crime that could still carry a year jail time. Hopefully, they wouldn't do that. But my goodness, like dude was down there just fixing roofs, which people needed. People voluntarily chose to do their service, but they say, "Oh, he isn't licensed right. He isn't insured right for the state of Florida. Florida has these specific requirements." Blah blah blah. Their press release says, ignorance is not an excuse. If you are in Charlotte County doing business with people of this community, you'd better be on the up and up and have appropriate licensing insurance. These people have been through enough, and I will not allow unlicensed contractors to further victimize them. Like maybe they'll come out that like this dude was doing a shoddy job, but he seemed to have been doing a legit business in Texas, went to Florida because there's a lot of need there and was providing services that people wanted. And I haven't seen anything to suggest that otherwise, but this brings up the kids because this isn't just like a sheriff's department acting ridiculous thing, over enforcement of licensing. And I have pretty strong feelings about licensing in general. That for the most part, most occupations should not require a form of license. That's generally how I feel about it. You should have expertise. You can have certifications, but buying a license essentially means that you are buying your right to offer a service from the state, right? Licensing in and of itself does not guarantee quality. You can have licensed contractors, anything, they could still do a sloppy job if they're not doing a good job in that particular moment. So you still have to look at what are reviews, what's their work track record, are they, constantly being sued for shoddy work? Like there's all this stuff. Just because the state says, yes, you have permission to do this work because you paid us money or took a test does not necessarily mean that you're getting quality work. Licensing in and of itself does not fix quality problems or safety issues. This guy's down there operating, providing a service that folks needed, and they decided to arrest him for it. And so the policy issue here is again, licensing altogether. Like we need all sorts of licensing reform. Like it's a thing everywhere. And again, something that Larry Sharp is great about talking about too, specific to New York State issues. There's all sorts of ridiculous licenses where you have to take hundreds of hours of work for something, or of study in order to do something like hair braiding and stuff like that. There's all sorts of ridiculous licenses where the state will sell back your right to work. But also, if we are going to have a licensing system, and I don't think we should, but if we are going to have a licensing system, there ought to be a lot more cross-state collaboration in this, right? Particularly in times of emergency. There's a lot of New Yorkers who care and want to help their friends and family down in Florida. If you're licensed to work on roofing, contracting, window installation, whatever, up here in New York, why shouldn't you be able to go and do that down in Florida? There ought to be a lot more of that. And I'm sure there is a bit of that, but there ought to be a lot more of that. You shouldn't be arresting people for this type of stuff. It's absolutely ridiculous. And especially in a time of natural disaster, you want that. You want either the charitable folks, the folks who are going to go down and just help because they want to help, and the companies looking to make money too. There's a company that's just like, we can go and make some money down there right now because there's a bunch of people who really need the service and they probably aren't able to get all of the contractors that they want in a timely manner. We can make this much more money by going to Florida. Good. Do it. Do that thing. Like we want that because again, what's the alternative? If you are a resident and you need something fixed now, are you going to be like, well, I could wait 4 months for this to happen, or I could pay a little bit more and get it done now? A lot of people would choose, yeah, let's pay a little bit more. And the more folks you have doing it's the same thing with, like, how, like, surge pricing works with, like, ride sharing services, but it works with prices in real time, right? There's a demand for this product. The price of that product goes up to try to meet that demand. The people who are in the best position or need that thing the most are going to pay a bit more for it. As you pay a bit more for it, more supply comes in, and then that price reduces back to equilibrium. Like that's how it ought to work in a disaster. And instead, what we're doing here is again, folks who are coming in from out of state getting arrested. Which again, the punishment for that crime, like up to 5 years in jail for this thing. My goodness, like why not if you're gonna do this, and I don't think you should do, but if you're gonna do this, like, jail, does that really make sense for the type of crime that this person committed, right? Like, to put them in a cage for operating without a license, not defrauding someone, not, uh, not necessarily putting them in danger. Again, if I hear more about the story and it turns out this guy was actually scamming folks or doing something unsafe, sure, I'll change my mind on this. But I cannot find anything to suggest that that's what was going on here. As far as I can tell, it's a legit business providing needed services in Florida. They're gonna throw him they might throw him in a cage for it. How is that a just and free government down in Florida? My goodness, that's some tyrannical nonsense happening down there. All right, thanks again for joining us here on A Free Solution. Give us a call if you want to participate in discussion. 585-346-3000. That's 585-346-3000. We'll be back in just a few minutes. Talk to you soon.
Your business relies on computers and technology to operate. Slow, unreliable networks and servers can cause unplanned downtime and affect your bottom line. The experts at SimpleTech Innovations are here to help. Their preventative maintenance program ensures that your computers and network are kept up to date and monitored for any issues, keeping your business running smoothly. They also help clients achieve HIPAA, PCI, and New York State cybersecurity compliance to keep your network safe and secure. Whatever your business IT needs are, SimpleTech Innovations should be your first call. They've won the best in Rochester 8 years in a row and have an A+ Better Business Bureau rating. Call them today for a free consultation at 585-200-3182. That's 585-200-3182. SimpleTech Innovations.
Hey, this is Kevin Wilson, host of A Free Solution. You ever needed a tool for just one project, but didn't want to spend the cash for something you'd use just once or twice? Well, there's a new tool library in Rochester where you can borrow just the thing you need instead of buying a new one. It's called the Tool Shed from the Southeast Area Coalition, and membership starts at just $25 a year. Use it for home projects or to support your business. Learn more and become a member at seektoolshed.org. That's SEAC toolshed.org.
Only available in the WISL store at WISL1040.com. Official top quality tees, hoodies, and coffee mugs depicting the colorful WISL logo or the already famous Mount Worstmore line of merch depicting Mount Rushmore style are for worst presidents. Of course, you know who is front and center up on that mountain. WISL official items make perfect gifts, or they're a great way for you to make a personal statement. Locally produced and sold only in the WISL store at WISL1040.com.
A free solution on the WYSL stations.
Welcome back to A Free Solution. I'm Kevin Wilson today. Thanks again for joining us here on this wonderful Monday afternoon, live on WYSL until 2 p.m. Give us a call if you want to participate in the show, 585-346-3000. That's 585-346-3000, or leave your comment online to anywhere we're streaming. And we're talking about what's going on in Florida right now. Again, the aftermath of Hurricane Ian and this contractor who got arrested. And I did check some of my stats from this, and there are 18 states that have like universal licensing recognition laws. So there's some like cross recognition of licenses of certain licenses across state. This is a big problem, not just for contracting too. It's a big problem for medicine as well. Like in that case, like again, doesn't make sense. Like that people are still people, no matter where you are. and there probably ought to be like more cross recognition of licenses to practice medicine across states. But contracting in a disaster makes sense. Waiving some of those requirements in disaster would also make sense. I think like the only like place where it might not make sense to do like some cross recognition of licenses is maybe like lawyers, because you might have substantially different enough laws where you need to, you know, change how you do things. But yeah, a bunch of these states have this, and yeah, again, it's weird. Like this guy just was coming in and doing business. Someone voluntarily contracted with him, and people wanted help. People wanted that service, and it doesn't keep us any safer to do this sort of thing. Like just absolutely wild. That that's how a government reacts to this, and again to potentially throw someone in a cage for this is just wildly disproportionate to the crime that this person is accused of, and it makes our collective lives worse. So the other thing I was kind of talking about in the last segment too was the idea of like, okay, if you have this massive surge in demand for services or anything else, in light of disaster, allowing that price to go up uh, incentivizes more people to bring those services or those goods to that area and alleviate the need for that thing, right? That's how prices should work. And then once that, you know, glut of supplies comes in, you'll eventually have equilibrium to meet the demand of, whatever extraordinary situation that services affect or goods are affected by. And that kind of gets to another thing. This one's a bit more controversial, but it's price gouging laws too. So in a disaster, there's always and every government loves to, they want to protect us consumers from, they'll say unscrupulous folks who are trying to charge too much in light of disaster, and are trying to profit from a dangerous situation. But here's the thing. That's probably not the best way to approach this. Now, it makes for great populist rhetoric. It makes for a great like story from politicians to say, "Yeah, we're protecting you." So if someone's charging too much for water, someone's charging too much for gas, whatever, like we're protecting you. Uh, but here's what happens when you have price controls, right? Every time you have price controls, what happens? You end up with shortages. That a lot of people will try to, you know, if the cost is effectively subsidized, if the cost uh, is not too expensive, and people want to hoard a good. Especially happens with gas and water in natural disaster situations, right? So people will stock up. You might have one person who doesn't necessarily need a whole bunch of water. Maybe they're all set, they're good, but they'll stock up a whole bunch of it, and then people who are late to the game, who come to these stores a little bit later, they can't find their water, they can't find their lumber, they can't find gas because there's no way of getting supplies in quick enough. Uh, in addition to the kind of regular logistics issues of a natural disaster happening, there's just not much incentive for people to be able to step up and reroute supplies on a regional basis for that type of thing if they can't make additional profit off of it. It just doesn't necessarily make sense. Maybe a little bit, but allowing prices to go up in these situations can be helpful. Again, it can help prevent any small number of actors from hoarding goods because it'd be too expensive to do so. If it becomes slightly more expensive to hoard bottled water or to hoard gasoline or to hoard lumber, then you're only going to buy exactly what you need. If it's more expensive to get those goods, you're only going to buy what you need for that situation, because to do otherwise would be costly, and you're going to end up with a bunch of stuff that you don't need that you paid way too much for. And again, I know politicians will be like, "Hey, there's some folks will take advantage of that, and make it so that some folks without money aren't going to have access to these goods at all." Well, again, if you set price controls, those folks might not have access to those goods anyway, unless you limit the number of items that people can purchase, which again is another way to do this. But what if you do need more? What if you do need more bottled water because you have a big family, or you're trying to get some more for, a church that's going to act as a shelter? And in paying that extra is worth it to you because like you want to make sure you're providing for the needs of your family or your community. We don't know what those individual needs are because again, sometimes you do need more stuff. It's not to take away from that. It's prices can make it so that the supply is able to meet the demand for those goods. And if you have an incentive to have more stuff come in, to truck in more gasoline, to truck in more water, truck in more lumber, whatever it is, in preparation for a natural disaster, then that's a good thing. And if you do that adequately, people will be able to get everything that they need at a much lower price. But if you don't allow that incentive, you still have unscrupulous actors who are going to hoard that stuff and then sell it otherwise. And then people will need it because then they're even more desperate after the disaster to get those things. That's what can happen. Or you got to hope that the government is there to provide that for you. And I don't fully trust the government is going to able to do that competently in every situation. In some situations they do deliver, but you've seen how badly that can go wrong. We saw how badly that went wrong in New Orleans in 2005. Like we see where the government just wasn't able to effectively provide for the needs of people after disaster. And and that starts to bring me to what my next segment will be about too. It's that there's all these programs in place, all these expectations of the government stepping in and providing for you in the face of disaster. And it's relatively recent that we've done that. Like within the past like 30 years that we've been doing that. There's been some federal disaster aid, but doing so again provides some bad incentives for people to be ill prepared for these situations from like individuals, families, nonprofits, up through state governments, and the federal government is again subsidizing a lack of preparedness in some of these situations. But my main point of talking about this segment here is that in the face of disaster, we should let goods go where they are needed most and shouldn't create artificial barriers to people being able to access the things that they need, that they demand, that they're looking for, especially in the face of disaster when their quality of life significantly depends on being able to access those things. And putting in controls, either limiting the service altogether through aggressive enforcement of licensing laws or price controls, you end up making it so that some people don't get access to those things altogether. So, in the name of trying to protect consumers, in the name of trying to protect us, the governments, particularly in this case, the government of Florida, but this is something that isn't exclusive to them, but these governments have made life demonstrably worse for their citizens. And that's what you need to look out for. Again, and folks like, unfortunately, Ron DeSantis is to me just another populist who's trying to use the power of government to make himself look good and to do things to quote unquote protect us. But in all honesty, if you let markets work, if you let liberty actually work, the lives of his citizens would be better. And again, he talks a big game about this stuff sometimes, but the policies and the enforcement actions of the states and the sheriff's offices in Florida kind of speak for themselves. That unfortunately there's the Democratic flavored tyranny and oppression here in New York State. They still got that down in Florida. It's still a thing. You have to look out for it at every level of government, local, state, and federal. And there's still a lot of work to do to try to overcome the attitudes that prevent people from being able to act freely. It's something that, in this case, hurts people in the face of disaster. Let's talk about this. We talked about the Jones Act too. Jones Act applies less in Florida. It's still a thing though, and it's more of a thing in Puerto Rico too. What are they trying to do? They're trying to protect American jobs. That sounds like a great thing. Instead, they're just hurting their own citizens who need it the most, who need that help right now. All right, thanks again for joining us here on A Free Solution. When we come back, we'll talk about more laws, more ways that the government makes it difficult to get through a disaster, and some of the bad incentives we have in place. Give us a call, 585-346-3000, if you want to participate in the show. We'll be back here on A Free Solution in a few minutes.
Pray for the USA. AM 1040 Avon Rochester, FM 92.1 Rochester, and FM 95.5 Spencerport.
Here's the latest forecast from the News 10 NBC Weather Center for tonight. Mostly cloudy skies, just an isolated lake effect shower of rain, maybe a wet snowflake in the hills. Temps in the 30s and low 40s. On Tuesday, again, not a rain up. There will be a chance for a couple of showers, temps in the 40s. On Wednesday, a real chill, breezy, lake effect rain, and even a couple of wet snow showers in the forecast Wednesday. I'm Rich Cornelia, WYSL.
Tom Hamilton here, president of Hamilton Wealth Management. Let's talk about investment fees and commissions. Just how much are you paying to have your investments managed? If you're like most people, you really don't know the cost, right? Does this make any sense? Paying for something without knowing how much? Okay, maybe your advisor is a friend and even sends you a birthday card every year. But what real value is he providing, and at what cost? Isn't that a fair question to ask of any service provider, including your broker? For a $2 million account with annual fees and commissions totaling 2.5%, you're paying $50,000 per year. That's a lot of money. Are you receiving that level of value? If you have over $250,000, I will personally review your investments, including an analysis of the actual costs. To schedule your no-cost review, call our Pittsford office at 381-9870 or contact us from our website, hamiltonwealthmanagement.com. That's hamiltonwealthmanagement.com.
Advisory services offered through Wealth Plan Partners. Securities offered through Securities America, Inc., member FINRA SIPC.
Your business relies on computers and technology to operate. Slow, unreliable networks and servers can cause unplanned downtime and affect your bottom line. The experts at Simple Tech Innovations are here to help. Their preventative maintenance program ensures that your computers and network are kept up to date and monitored for any issues, keeping your business running smoothly. They also help clients achieve HIPAA, PCI, and New York State cybersecurity compliance to keep your network safe and secure. Whatever your business IT needs are, Simple Tech Innovations should be your first call. They've won the Best in Rochester 8 years in a row and have an A+ Better Business Bureau rating. Call them today for a free consultation at 585-200-3182. That's 585-200-3182. Simple Tech Innovations.
Hi, I'm Dr. Pat Brophy from UR Medicine, Golisano Children's Hospital. What does it mean for a child to reach their fullest potential? It means an athlete making the varsity team, when doctors once thought she'd never be able to walk. It means a little boy playing at the playground after spending the first year of his life in the hospital. At Golisano Children's Hospital, we want to give every child the chance to be a kid, but we need your help to do that. So please, donate today.
If you think today's gas prices are out of control, think what it might cost to heat your home this winter. Consider Air & More infrared zone heaters, which may save you up to 50% compared to using your furnace. Air & More zone heaters have no exposed hot surfaces, completely safe around pets and children, plus easy roll casters. And new copper PTC technology means no bulbs to replace ever. Save big on heating bills and stay comfy and healthy this winter. Buy direct and get lowest prices anywhere on the web. Call 800-707-8725 or visit air_more.com.
I'm Stephen Nichols. Since 1984, Nichols has been family operated and a trusted name for home service. We provide plumbing and electrical installation and service. And I am thrilled to announce that we are growing and looking to add to our scope of services. We are looking for a professional handyman who is skilled in drywall repair, carpentry, and more. If you are interested in joining the best team in Rochester, call 585-299-3101 or visit nicholselectric.com to fill out an application.
At Roberts Wesleyan University, we believe you can bring your greater story to light. To celebrate our new status as a university, you can earn our $1,000 early action grant by applying before November 15th. Start your transformation story today at roberts.edu/apply. That's roberts.edu/apply.
Handing a kid a perfectly made Tom Walls ice cream cone is probably the favorite part of my job. Eyes get wider and a smile takes over their entire face. I'm Michaela from Tom Walls Avon, and I want to make an ice cream cone that makes you smile.
Tom Walls. Avon Gun and Hunting Supply, a locally owned and operated gun shop specializing in pre-owned firearms and repairs. Get your rifle, shotgun, or pistol serviced and tuned before you take it to the field. Open Tuesday through Saturday. Avon Gun and Hunting Supply, East Main Street, next to the Bank of Castile.
A free solution on the WYSL stations.
Welcome back to A Free Solution. I'm Kevin Wilson, host for today. Live here on WYSL until 2 p.m. Give us a call if you want to participate in the show, 585-346-3000. That's 585-346-3000. And we're also streaming online on the Free Solution Facebook page, Free Solution YouTube channel, Free Solution group, the Kevin Wilson page, Kevin Wilson Twitter. And of course, we got the podcast too. Just look for A Free Solution, find out most podcasts. And of course, go to WYSL1040.com. You can find the podcast there as well. You'll see some links up there. And we'll get to a couple of comments here too. Patty says, someone within town tore down, took away all the handmade write-in Larry Sharp signs I put up there. The only thing keeping me freaking out is that they are so afraid of write-in third parties that they take down signs. Hope they can make me laugh at some point today. Yeah, that's totally a thing. It's so frustrating that happens. Even if you have a sign in a legit place where you're allowed to have a public sign, so it's a frustrating thing that campaigns have to deal with is folks just tear them down. They get mad. Sometimes, county or city folks will take them down if they're in a place where like they're mowing or something. But yeah, it's a thing that happens all the time. Just petty, political activist types, will take them down or whatever. So it's always frustrating to see. But yeah, hopefully writing in Larry Sharp is going to make a huge impact this November. And so that's who I plan on voting for. And yeah, we'll see how it goes. Gene just saying hi on Facebook. Hi, Gene. Thanks for being here. John has something I haven't looked into this, so I'll have to check this out. He says, did you hear the Loeb Boathouse in Central Park, which has been a New York attraction since 1954, closed its doors for good on October 16th per a Department of Labor filing? According to the document, the venue is shuttering due to rising labor and cost of goods, resulting in a layoff of 163 employees. But the current economic situation does not permit it to sustain itself. Yeah, I mean, it's wild, John. This type of stuff happens, unfortunately, all the time. And yeah, I mean, it's just sometimes it's just that's demand. You got to pay folks, and costs are going to go up, and you're not going to be able to sustain these things that are happening. And I mean, I'd love to talk more about, like, I'm not going to go into this show, but like Central Park is like a fascinating model of private public partnerships, in that there's a nonprofit group that maintains like a massive amount of the look of Central Park. It's not, they get some funding now from the city, but it used to be the case where they just went out and did a whole bunch of stuff on their own. Like the history of this stuff is like fascinating. Like, just New York City was just totally incapable of like maintaining this public space and keeping it safe and keeping it beautiful for so long. And so folks just stepped up and cleaned it up and did their thing. So a huge amount of the work done in that park is not the government. It's volunteers through I forget what it's called. It's like Central Park Conservancy or something like that. But look it up, check it out. It's an interesting way of private organizations solving problems. And whenever you hear like some of the progressive folks say, but without government, how will we have parks and libraries and all this stuff? I'm like, people will still do it. People still want these things, and if they're really dedicated to making that happen, they will. They do. It's happened. There are examples of this even in a place like New York City. All right. So anyway, back to the main topic at hand, though. Thanks for the comments, y'all. But the main topic at hand was just the ways in which laws and policies can get in the way of disasters. So we talked about licensing. We talked about prices. Again, the progressives and even like and populists will kind of phrase it as price gouging, but economists will just talk about it as prices are prices. If you let the price go up and create incentives for people to be able to meet demand, even though it's not great when prices go up, you're still able to. That might be the optimal solution. And that sounds kind of cold, but would you rather have people not have the thing or have the thing, be able to get the thing? That's the decision that you're making here. And politicians want to be able to control that and don't fully grok the full consequences of price controls over and over again. Like, it's just a constant thing that happens. So the other thing I want to talk about is kind of like the federal incentives around this, right? So we have organizations like FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, that comes in, and they're supposed to, whenever there's a big disaster, states can apply for that money. It's this law that's been in place since the 1950s. And even prior to that, Congress has done like individual appropriations for federal funds to help individual communities or states when a disaster happens. So it's sort of been a thing since the beginning of the 19th century, and since then it's kind of been a far more permanent fixture in American life, particularly since as I understand, like after Hurricane Andrew hit in 1992. It's just been far more of an expectation of whenever there's a big natural disaster, the federal government's going to come in, provide a significant amount of aid and help people out, right? There's and we kind of want that, right? Like even like the most cold-hearted libertarians, like, yeah, that's that's probably where we don't hate that the government does this. It feels like the right thing to do, right, to help folks out. You just get a problem with incentives with doing this, right? Because if you are expecting the government to help you out and depending on that assistance, whether you're a state, whether you're a local community or a family, you're putting yourself at risk. And if you're doing that to the detriment of your own preparation for natural disasters, that's a serious problem. And that's the issue with this, right? Like in theory, right, we want everyone to like be prepared. We want communities on that level to be prepared for these natural disasters, both financially and in terms of supplies and other logistics needed for this, right? We want people to get out. If everyone knows that the government's going to bail you out in this situation, though, what's your incentive to be prepared? In fact, it kind of in a short-term thinking way costs you money to spend your resources preparing when those resources could be used for something else short-term, and that the federal government is going to bail you out in a long-term situation. It creates a perverse incentive for places to do that. And that's not to say that the federal government shouldn't jump in and help out in these situations. I know some folks are like, oh man, what a cold-hearted libertarian this guy is. He doesn't want to help out in a disaster. Yeah, no, of course I do. Do I think the federal government always needs to do it? No. Even in absence of federal government, there's still going to be nonprofits that take on a huge share of that burden, and in fact continue to do so. But it creates some weird incentives there, and related to that is actually the things like flood insurance, right? The federal government has subsidized the absolute heck out of flood insurance in places that we know are risky, that the private insurance market will set prices. They'll sell you insurance. Insurers will sell you something if the price is right. It's just that it's not a price that people want to pay, and it's so expensive that it's tough to make mandatory. So we subsidize it. Again, is a particular quirk of electoral politics. It's a problem in many coastal areas, but particularly in Florida, where people are building in areas that are flood prone, that we have known for a long time are subject to flooding when a hurricane hits in coastal areas, that there's a chance every decade or two a hurricane's going to come through and just totally wreck all the property in that area. And you can do some things to prevent it, like fortify your house, make it tougher, or you can get insurance and cover the loss of the property damage. But doing so in a market that isn't subsidized is expensive, because the insurers know that because this is a disaster that is almost certain to happen over a long enough period of time, they have to price that in so that they're able to still make a profit off of this. And there's nothing wrong with that either. Again, that's why people do business. Or again, you have federal flood insurance in these situations. You subsidize it, and now it's cheaper to build in these risky places. But then a disaster happens, the federal government and any of the insurers that they're using for this stuff, they're all on the hook for this stuff. It's all going to be paid for by someone like us up here in New York. And then they, with the same bad incentives, rebuild again in the risky area. It's a cycle that's a problem. And again, it sounds kind of cruel. I have friends who live in these areas. I've lived in these areas, but building in a coastal area is inherently risky. You're especially down in Florida. It's inherently risky. You're taking the chance that your home is going to be destroyed by a hurricane. Again, you can price that in, but who ought to pay for that? Should it be the folks who are getting to live on the Florida coast, or should it be the rest of us? All right, when we come back, we'll keep talking about that and maybe some more. Give us a call if you want to participate in the show, weigh in on these topics. 585-346-3000. That's 585-346-3000. We'll be back here on A Free Solution in just a few minutes.
Why do businesses choose to move their website from Wix and Squarespace to SimpleTech Innovations? Maybe it's their excellent customer service or attention to detail. Maybe it's their ability to give a truly customized solution. Or perhaps they just like the fact that SimpleTech is a local small business that builds great relationships with its clients. Whatever the reason may be, you can rest assured knowing that the local team at SimpleTech has your best interest in mind when building or updating your website. They're hands-on and love helping customers achieve their goals. But don't take my word for it. They've won the best in Rochester 8 years in a row and have an A+ Better Business Bureau rating. If your website doesn't match your dreams or isn't achieving your goals, give the professionals at SimpleTech Innovations a call today for a consultation at 585-200-3182. That's 585-200-3182. SimpleTech Innovations.
As a veteran of the United States military, I can finally get the opportunity to enjoy special events, things that we couldn't afford, thanks to VetTix.
Every empty seat at a concert, a game, or a play is a missed opportunity to say thanks to a veteran and service member. We could give our veterans a special event where they too can create their own cherished memories. Visit vettix.org. Find out how you can make a difference in a veteran's life.
WYSL. Getting podcasts of your favorite WYSL shows is easier and better than ever. Use your favorite device, PC, mobile, or tablet to visit WYSL1040.com. Simply click on the podcast tab to select, listen, download, and share instantly. Works great with any wireless device. No additional apps are necessary. Podcasts of all our local shows are easier to access and play, so share them with your friends. And thanks for listening anywhere, anytime to the voice of liberty, the WYSL stations. A free solution on the WYSL stations.
Welcome back to A Free Solution. I'm Kevin Willis Jones today. Thanks again for joining us here on this wonderful Monday afternoon. We're live for one more segment till 2 p.m. Give us a call, 585-346-3000. That's 585-346-3000. Or leave your comment online anywhere we're streaming. John on Facebook says, FEMA, failure to effectively manage anything. Yeah, man, again, I don't have a lot of faith. I am not going to try to count on FEMA for anything. I hopefully never have to. And I just encourage everyone to try to be as prepared on their own as possible, because Sometimes the aid comes and it gets to you quickly and you get the help when you need it. Other times, maybe not, and you don't want to put yourself in a position where that aid is essential. I mean, there are things like grants that FEMA gives out to mitigate property damage that sometimes take a little while to get, but that you eventually get those things. And sure, that's certainly a thing. But like immediate disaster relief, again, you gotta hope that the folks managing it are competent, and sometimes they are, sometimes they aren't. Just don't gamble you or your family's life on that. So what I was talking about before the break, though, is I was talking about the flood insurance and other like kind of incentives for building in areas that are risky, that expose more individuals and property to risk, because we essentially subsidize that risk and encourage it, right? We don't price in that risk to people building and living in these areas. And I was trying to think of the phrase, I ended up finding it during the break, the phrase of like, if you always promise that you're going to give disaster relief, people will kind of act in ways with the anticipation of getting that relief. It's called the Samaritan's Dilemma, is what it's called. So I ended up finding that. And so with the flood insurance program, this is something that's kind of been around for a while. They tried to make some reforms to it in the 1960s, and then just this year they ended up going through with some reforms to the flood insurance program, which is a good thing. It's interesting how those incentives played out, right? So the incentives played out like this: that they tried to get something that was they tried to start to wind down some of these subsidies, right? To get to something that would make sense in terms of a private insurance market for flooding in flood prone areas. But the insurance isn't mandatory, right? So what they ended up doing is, again, they kind of raised the prices in order to get flood insurance in the flood prone area. You have something you now have to pay something that's a little bit closer to what the market would price that. And a lot of people, because that type of insurance wasn't mandatory in many areas, just dropped the coverage. So with the hurricane hitting, a lot of those folks who dropped the coverage are in for a bad time, as their homes and their properties and anything else got destroyed by a hurricane if they lived in one of those areas. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens, and that's not an optimal outcome either. The optimal outcome is, again, either people pay for that, they price that in, that is part of living in this area, is you have to have the insurance, or you just have less building in some of these areas. Like there's a very real like ecological calculus that ought to go into living in certain areas, right? Again, Florida, you're going to have hurricanes. You go to the West, you're going to have water issues. Like it's just a thing. And we could like narrow down to that individual situation and say, hey, no one should have to, be without water infrastructure. Okay, sure. But we can zoom out and be like, well, why should people living in New York or Illinois or North Carolina subsidize folks living in the West who don't have access to that water infrastructure? This is essentially a choice that they've made, and they are free to do that, but they have to pay to do that choice. Again, it's the same thing. Like if I want to live in a big house and have all the bills and maintenance to go with it, well, fine, that's my right to do that, but I've got to pay for that. No one else should have to pay for that big place. And same thing living in a flood prone area. We create these bad incentives that expose people to danger, that encourage developers to build in places that used to be like mangrove marshes or other wetlands in Florida, places that are low-lying areas on a coastal plain, that when you get a storm surge, you now have not only like an area that was going to flood anyway, but also all the natural barriers to that flooding, the mangroves, the reeds, the grasses, like all that stuff is now gone and replaced with concrete. What do you think's going to happen? It's going to be bad. It's going to be a disaster. It's going to destroy property. It's going to endanger lives. again, and it sounds kind of harsh, but because again, these are places where I know they're beautiful and wonderful to live, but the prices need to be included in that. And they say, oh, Kevin, but people already live there, and you're going to say that their price of housing is going to have to go up. Yeah, no, like again, someone has to pay for it. Someone has to pay for these things. It's either the people who get to benefit from living in that area. You're living in Florida, cool. Like you don't get snow, or it's the rest of us. It's us who has to pay for it. And we make these choices all the time. I'll say this over and over again. Like these choices seem like the right thing to do. They seem like the nice thing to do. They seem like the thing to do that helps people. And in the short term, it absolutely does. But in the long term, we're putting people in riskier situations and piling onto the national debt that is already wildly unsustainable. And if we want a government that is going to be sustainable from a financial perspective, and a government that is going to be able to handle what, if we do have more natural disasters in the future, maybe we do, maybe we don't, they're going to get more expensive to deal with because we're subsidizing risk, because we're encouraging people to be in risky areas, because we're not willing to make the tough decisions to say, no, if you want to do this thing, do so at your own risk. And like that's the ethos that I wish so many more politicians would do. Hey, it's your right to do that thing, but if you do so, you're doing so at your own risk. We're not going to bail you out for what may be a poor decision. Again, you want to go build a building in a flood-prone area? Fine, it is nice there, cool, but we're not going to bail you out if it goes badly. If you lose the whole building, that is on you, and you need to make sure that the people living there understand the risk of doing so. I don't think that's an unreasonable ask. That's how we should operate in a free country, that you have responsibility. With liberty comes responsibility. The flip side of that is what we do so much with now, which is, hey, the government's going to be here to protect you, and we're going to provide for you on everything. We're going to do all this stuff, and you won't have any responsibility. No worries. Everything's good. But it ends up being wildly expensive. Your life is still at risk. Your finances are still at risk. And when push comes to shove, when you're expecting the government to help you, they might not come through in the way that you're hoping to. So the best thing you can do is to just understand what the risks are in your situation and to try to do your best to be prepared for these disasters. And then what the government ought to do is, again, disincentivize the putting people in bad, risky situations, disincentivize the things like flood insurance that encourage people to take unnecessary risk, and then to make sure that when a disaster does happen, even in areas where there are relatively low risk, it's to make sure that the government isn't getting in the way of help getting to where it needs to. It's to allow, licensed contractors from other states to be able to go and serve the people whose houses need to be rebuilt after a disaster. It's to remove price controls that allow goods to get into these disaster areas as quickly as possible with as much incentive as possible so that people can have their basic needs met, so they can get their water, their food, their gasoline, their lumber, all that stuff. Lift the disincentives from doing so, lift the price controls from doing so, because the alternative isn't that, oh, everyone gets everything that they need at the price they want. No, the alternative to that is that people just don't get their stuff. We're all left worse off. There's a lot of this stuff that happens constantly. Like, look for in every policy areas where politicians think they're helping, maybe genuinely so. But what they actually do is make it harder for us to survive difficult situations. Check out all these policies. Check out other places where they apply, because it's not just Florida and hurricanes. This is just a timely example and one that happens to be close to me, but check that out. All right, thanks again for joining us here on A Free Solution. I will be back on Wednesday. Have a wonderful week, folks.